Hello, today is October 11th, 2018. This is the kubeadm office hours. And the first thing we had on the agenda was to talk about the config changes to get it to V1 Beta 1, or to talk about getting kubeadm in general to GA. Fabrizio, did you want to walk through maybe like the original document and the one that...
Okay, if you want, I can pass first of all, I passed the link of the original document in the notes.
Okay.
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 So at the beginning of the document, today I wrote some notes about the pending changes that we have to do. I skipped the first one because there is a PR already out, but the people that did the PR today is not here. So we move on. Improve control plane configuration by using substructure. Why do we need these? It's just a matter of UX. So basically, what happened is that now the fields related to the Kube API server, Kube controller manager, and Kube scheduler are all mixed in the same level into the cluster configuration object. Okay, this works, but it is not really nice. We have, for instance, we have a field which is called Kube API server extra arg, and then we have API server volumes, controller server extra arg, controller server. So it's just not nice. There is also some weird things. For instance, for the host volumes, we use the writable instead of read-only, which is more or less the standard kubeadm, but those are minor things. So the original idea from Luke that was discussed for Lucas is to rearrange those fields into three substructure, which are the three components.
So why don't I share my screen while you're talking, and we can actually walk through the actual logistics. So we have like the screen share along with it, so somebody can understand what's going on. Hopefully this is the right screen. Yep. All right. So let me also get the kubeadm doc in here. All right. So the first one you said was improve control by using substructs. And that was also this portion here. So when you're concretely looking at the types file,
and you look and you search for the for the cluster configuration, here it is. Okay. Maybe better if we look at the V1 Alpha 3 API. So we see the current configuration, because this document is kind of a little bit updated in some details, outdated in some details. APIs, okay.
Oops. Well, the types.go is the same as that one. So.
Yes, okay. Okay, search for cluster configuration.
Yep, right here.
Okay. Here we see that there are, starting from line 84, there are a set of fields which belongs to the component, but they are all the same level, so it's not nice. The proposal here is to group the field that belong to the API server under an API server object. The same for the controller manager, the same for the scheduler.
Okay. Now, a lot of these args, eventually in the future, will no longer be args, right? Like most of this should be component configuration, even for things like the scheduler today, right?
Totally agree. Yes.
Yeah. So the idea.
But I think there is also a note. The to-do note say the same.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So basically right now, the only thing is to abstract this into its own type, so that way all the API server things are together, all the controller manager things are together.
Yes, the API server type is the most complex because it gets also okay. It gets also the audit policy configuration, which belongs to the API server, and the API server extra sans.
Okay.
So this is just UX, and
Yeah, I don't think it's critical, but I can see why you'd want to do it, right?
Yes, this is what it was planned or discussed. So we are deciding now if we want to go for or not. In my opinion, makes sense. Not critical, but makes sense.
I agree. I think I come up with the same assertion. It's not critical for the behavior, but if we want to transition it into a more manageable structure and group the configuration together, that makes sense to me too as well.
Okay, there is another little awareness that we are going to fix, which is if you look at the host path mount structure.
Host path mount.
Yes.
Yep.
So if you go to the definition of the structure below. Okay. When this structure was created, we added the writable attribute. And this is the opposite of the standard, or more or less standard in Kubernetes, which is readable. And I think that we can switch now and manage the conversion when in the API machinery, in the API conversion.
Okay, I'd have to dig into the details of why it was originally writable.
It was writable because basically when it was introduced, so the default was false. It was chosen to have writable in order to not to have a implicit default when migrating from when the attribute does not exist to after.
Okay.
Okay, so this one is the first change, and it is basically the same concept that is implemented in the PR pending from Rosti, which is the first point that says refactor the discovery join API types by using substructure. Okay, here the problem is that when we do join, basically join supports 3 types of discovery.
Yes.
The token discovery, file discovery, and the third one, which I don't remember. But basically today, the attributes that drive all these discovery mode are all in the flat structure, which is join configuration. If you maybe it is easier if you look at the source code and you search for join configuration. You see, you have all the discovery attributes there. Someone belongs to discovery file mode, someone to discovery token mode, but basically you don't know which one you have to assign according to the mode. So it is not clear. Again, a problem of UI, UX, and in the original design of the API, the idea was to have a substructure for each discovery mode. So
the different modes would be file versus token versus. So are you thinking? Hold on, let me take a look here.
Yes, I didn't have time to review it, but basically you have discovery, file, it line 300 something. So 309 you have file, and so the idea is to group attributes by type of discovery. That's the idea.
I get that.
Again, not a priority, but your UX.
Yep. So I would put these both underneath the same category. So hold on.
I agree. Okay, so not even not difficult to execute, but some work to do.
Okay.
Okay. The add-on configuration instead is something that we have to do because basically it is a problem of UX, because now we have the feature flag core DNS that is not nice, but also a problem of missing feature. So today I went through this issue, and in the document of the API I summarized the main question or pending point that are discussed here, at least from my. So if you look at the first tab.
Did you see the example of the new bundles stuff that they're talking about? What I'm a little bit remiss. I get the idea, right, of putting it in here, because that actually abstracts away some of the dependency inside of the code itself and gets us out of some of the hairy problems we have, especially at the end of cycle. But Google has been trying to push this notion of a bundle, which is a well-defined group or set of add-ons that you can apply at the end, or a channel, so to speak. So that way you could vet the ability to.
Honestly, I went to the project, but there is no documentation.
Yeah.
So, but I got the idea of channel of bundles, but I think that we have two kind of problems. So the first problem is that how in kubeadmin and kubeadmin config we define what we want, and at which degree of configurability we give to the user. And the second problem is that how do we make this happen? And bundle get into the picture in the second part. And because, for instance, now we cannot, there is no way to let the user to choose the image repository to use for each add-on. This was a problem, for instance.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. This is a problem for for the overrides.
Okay, so if you look at the first tab, I make a list of what are at the beginning of the document, of what are the open points that I'm aware. So we have a lack of functionality for the. The problem is that today the choice between kubeDNS and core DNS is weird. We have this feature flag that by default is true.
Yeah. I totally agree. That, I mean, that needs to be removed or excised later on, right? Like
yes, we have to let the user to choose which DNS they want in a more clear way. Then there is we get into the problem of what degree of configurability we let the user have on the add-on. So considering that some configurability will be driven by the component config, but currently the component config apply only to the proxy.
Well, yeah, you need to be able to provide the problem is the overrides apply to all the images and not just like one or two. If you want to be able to customize the repositories for your individual add-ons, you know, that you want to apply, it becomes it's not possible today. It's again, this falls underneath the. I think this falls underneath the nice to have, not the super critical. Like we can't. Some of these pieces do need to get fixed, especially if you're for doing air-gapped installations, to be able to provide the overrides that pass all the way through to the individual components. But they're not providing many registries or repos is not I would say a hard requirement to get to GA. It's a nice to have.
Yes, I agree. And probably we have to choose also when someone provide a new image repository, if this image repository apply to all the images or only to the control plane images.
Okay, so let me move this tab over here.
So the problem of add-ons is that there are many pieces that should be addressed. One is how to choose the add-ons, or how to choose the DNS add-on. The second is the question about image repository, and how to choose it, and how to choose it, and where to apply it. If I specify an image repository, I should use this image repository also for core DNS.
So I see what you're saying, but this is one of those. You could do a generate if people wanted to override, and a generate would choose all the defaults and specify them in their list, and a person can customize, right? Like we have the print defaults option, kubeconfig print defaults, right? And print defaults are basically throughout a configuration file that has all the details. The one problem we don't have is being able to specify the manifest or the registry location.
Yes, this is the beginning of the discussion. Along the way, for instance, I discussed the possibility if we have to allow the user to change manifests. At which, yes, because for instance, this is a long thread. So, but basically, someone was asking us to deploy, to use, I don't know, the deployments instead of daemon set. In my opinion, if we are giving this kind of opportunity,
that's too much flexibility in my mind.
I totally agree, because otherwise, if you go over a certain limit of configurability, basically we are not able to support upgrades.
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to do something like that, they could just, they could just take the output of what kubeadm specifies and read those manifests into their own settings and customize them appropriately, right? There's
Yes.
nothing that prevents a person from doing this ad hoc. And I think that level of configuration is not something we want to support because it's too flexible, right?
Yes, I agree. And this is one point where I think that we have to put a limit. The limit is that, okay, you have the possibility to customize, to choose which DNS to install, to customize the image repository, and then you have some ability to configure parameters.
I think from an add-ons perspective, having an explicit list that allows you to customize is a good thing, right? Because people, and being able to generate it is also a good thing. I do wonder what the overlap is with bundles, because I have not dug into bundles. So I do think it could be potentially premature, right? So if we were to optimize and do this work for having an explicit list, it seems like this also solves the same problem at this point. But I have not dug into this in detail yet, so I don't know where the overlap is. I would put this as needs to evaluate overlap with bundles.
I think that for for add-on configuration is it is nice to have, but not critical, the part of customizing manifests, but the part of choosing add-on or of specifying add-on is a need to have. So what I'm trying to say is that with regard to add-on, we have many problems to be addressed, and not all have the same priority, in my opinion.
So you're wanting to put it here, right?
I want to put it here, at least the part of the replacing the feature flag. Then we can put in nice to have, giving the possibility to for add-on configuration, manifest change, and also image repository change.
So this isn't really 191 then, if you want to replace the feature flag business.
Yes, this issue became a mess of discussion, so I'm trying to get some sense out of it. So a lot of value, but at the end messy. There is an issue from Andy, for instance.
Yes.
Also for this topic. Okay. And then always talking about add-on, there are some other things which are kind of difficult now, is that how to make core DNS and kubeadm configurable. Because basically what happened that kubeadm install a config map that the user cannot change for those two components. And component does not support component config.
I'm missing some context here on that particular point. So
okay, I try to give you the context. So when kubeadmin install core DNS, for instance, it creates a deployment.
Yes.
And there's also a config map that is the configuration of core DNS.
Okay.
Now this config map is hard-coded in the kubeadmin code.
Yes.
And these are two problems. What happens if when the core DNS change version, and how we let user to change this config map? The problem here is that
I hear what you're saying.
And the same goes for kubeDNS.
I don't think it's, because right now we tightly control the versions. I do think it's a nice to have. I don't think it's critical for release. I do see, because we tightly control and version our versions of core DNS, like we do it lockstep, and we do it even with the SIG scalability, to make sure that we pick a specific version as part of the release process. So I don't think that it's a requirement for getting us to beta. I do think that it eventually, in the long haul, it would be a nice to have thing, but I think most people will try to trust the defaults, especially as kubeDNS is meant to be deprecated, and we should only go with core DNS going forwards. And ideally, like, I still need to dig into bundles, because I don't exactly know how bundles solves this problem of configuration and versioning, right? It's basically like, how do I manage my package inside of Kubernetes?
Yes, because then the problem gets more complex, because there was some issue. I can link them too. So the people installing core DNS, customizing the config map directly into Kubernetes, and then using kubeadmin for doing upgrades. And kubeadmin was not aware of the customization of the config map. So kubeadmin was replacing the config map with the default.
Okay.
So
I still think it's a nice to have. I don't think it's, for most people, they are not going to pay attention, especially as senior defaults get chosen over time. I do think that there will be people that will want to customize and tweak, especially as they scale out their deployments.
Okay, I can agree. So there are only some people that really want one issue about talking about this, but there is another problem which is related to add-on, and this problem, if I remember well, was raised by Jason, and this is related to the node-specific customization. In that case, if I remember well, was node-specific customization for kubeproxy. I remember that we were talking about an init container for changing configuration.
Oh, that's a bug in the proxy, though. Like, people are already starting to fix that.
Okay.
Well, okay. It's not just the bug in the proxy, though. You do need the node-specific configuration to just be able to set things like the hostname override for AWS-based installs, unless you're overriding the default hostname for those hosts.
That's not really add-on specific, though. Like this particular one here, this is across. We don't have a standard pattern that we apply to all Kubernetes components, including the proxy, for doing sort of node level customization, which you should allow.
Yeah, I got you. I missed the context of being specific to add-ons.
And there's other work going on right now too, like the proxy change is being fixed, that particular problem. There's patches already available for it.
Okay. So I think that's all I'm aware of about add-ons.
Okay.
So if I got it right, we are fixing there is a kind of agreement in getting a list of add-ons.
Yes.
That replace the feature flag. Everything else is nice to have.
Mm-hmm.
For the part of the manifest change, we will look into the bundles. Core DNS is low priority.
Mm-hmm.
And node specific customization for now it is out of the game.
Yes. So
okay.
why don't I go back here and just do a strike through on this, and we can, that specific one is separate.
Okay. Great. So next topic is move out bootstrap token. So here basically it is there was an effort that now it is a good point to find a new home for bootstrap token code.
It already should have landed.
Yes, it landed. Okay, and now basically we have to go back to the kubeadm code, to the kubeadm API, and have a look if we can clean up further our code. Because for instance, we have types which are related to the bootstrap token that we are replicating for each API version.
Yeah, and that's crazy. That was always
crazy. That's crazy. Maybe we can keep those types and move in the new place. Before it was not possible because no one was accepting this code. Now maybe that we can. So this is not a change that will have user-facing impact. Is only a cleanup.
That is true. So it's not a requirement. It makes our lives easier for managing this stuff, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement. Well, it depends if somebody uses it from the API. Then it becomes a pain in the keister because we have to manage it going forward. So I guess we do have to excise it, because otherwise, if it's in the API, someone can use it, and we have to support it, right, in the fashion that it's in. So it'd be like v1 beta1 dot bootstrap tokens dot whatever.
Okay.
So I wouldn't put it like critical. Cleanup. I don't know. Important and critical. Let's do this.
Okay.
Important long term. And I would put it that. And then down below we could have I don't know why it's hold on. Okay.
Okay. Then the last two changes which are related to the API are one is to implement staked TCD.
Yep.
So basically, to have kubeadm spin up a new local etcd and when joining a second control plane instance. And this was listed in the API change because we were expecting that some kind of impact on the API as well. I have a work in progress PR out.
Yep.
And so far, there is no impact, but there is no impact under the assumption that the etcd uses the same advertised address of the API server.
That was the one thing. So Jason, this is the one departure from the existing configuration, because there was for the peer, the advertised address was listed for the peer.
So
because this is the same address as the API server endpoint.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The only reason why the original instructions didn't go that route was mainly because of the limitations of the existing init and hard coding kind of localhost and everything. So
wouldn't control plane join have to have an option to say etcd or not etcd?
We discussed this in the issue.
Okay.
And there is a kind of agreement that we want to keep it simple and basically go with etcd and control plane always together.
That's fine, so long as it's denoted. For people who are trying to, I could see both arguments though, because a lot of people do manage etcd separately, right?
Yes, but the discussion is that, okay, I start with kubeadm. I have a simple cluster. Then I add a control plane and I increase and I add also etcd, and I start growing. At a certain point, if I continue to grow, the right step will be to move to an external etcd. In that case, we miss something that pivots from the local etcd to the external etcd. This was discussed in the issue.
In the pull request or in the issue?
No, not in the issue.
Okay. My brain is segfaulting from too many issues being.
Yeah, no, I think when we discussed it, the idea was that, you know, for the simple use case where you want the stacked etcd control plane, it makes sense to just keep them in lockstep and not to add additional complexity to be able to add just one or the other.
I think we can always add that feature at the end, because you can add another. Hold on 1 second here. Do we specify it as a? You could have another option for join that you could add at a later date, and it doesn't preclude you from doing this going forwards. So that seems like a legitimate path forwards. This is the default for now. We can always add the other option in the next iteration, but I would definitely open an issue for adding this option. Do we want to support this as a? Because right now it's not even, it's like an alpha-ish thing. It's experimental, right? Like we could support this as a beta level feature and not promote this particular feature to GA until we get that other option, which seems like a legitimate thing to do, because we would want to support both for GA.
Well, so what use cases do we have for scaling stack control plane and then you know, scaling just additional control plane instances off of that versus kind of the complete external etcd workflow where you have your external etcd and then you scale up, you know, the control plane instances independently?
Well, that's what it would be for. It'd be scaling up the control plane instances independently. So if a person wanted to like set up three control plane nodes, sans etcd, they could do it in absentia pretty easily, because right now we don't have a path for them, right?
So they can already do that.
Well, they could do it with init, right? Like,
No, the control plane join right now works with external etcd, and this doesn't change that behavior. This just adds support for the stacked etcd by default.
So basically, if you are using an external etcd, you scale your control plane and your etcd independently.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. If you are using, basically this PR is upgrading local etcd, the core local etcd, to scale to stacked.
I get it. I gotcha. Sorry, my brain is fried.
So okay, I kindly ask you, Tim and Jason, to have a look at the PR, because there are 2 points that deserve attention. They are also commented in the special note for your reviewers.
Mm-hmm.
So there is 1 point that is tricky for me, that how, when I'm joining the second node, or the nodes, I need to sorry for that. I need to search for the existing etcd instance. And basically now what I'm doing for searching the existing etcd endpoint, I'm querying Kubernetes, please give me all the components that have such labels. And I find all the pods that are running etcd in the system namespace, and it is fine. But then I have to grab out from this pod the endpoint address. And I have two ways to do this. The first is to basically parse the etcd command line, which is kind of weird for me, but it works. Or now I'm using a much more simple way. It is to use the pod IP. But I'm not sure if the pod IP can be different from the endpoint IP.
If you're using the API server, it would be different. If you're using the API, unless you do a cert SAN for that address, because you're using the API server address, which is the external hostname address, as the peer, right?
Yes.
You could always.
Could you learn it from the cert?
Sorry, I didn't catch.
Could you learn it from the cert? Could you learn the IP from the IP SAN?
It'd be better to use the pod IP, but in that particular case. But you could always embed metadata inside of because if you're searching in the system namespace for the pod, nothing prevents you from adding metadata either as annotation or as labels to make it easier to parse than it would be to try to just infer from the data that's already there as part of the manifest. You know what I'm saying?
No, I got it. It will work really fine for the new clusters.
Yeah, for old clusters, well, it's an experimental feature. So we could even keep it experimental in this next cycle, but then give it 1 cycle for it to have that metadata in there for parsing.
Or I have to kind of assign this metadata when doing upgrades.
It could be part of an upgrade process, yes. Because
okay,
you have to run the manifest. Yeah, you have to run the manifest no matter what, because you're going to change the version. So if you add an annotation either as metadata for the manifest, or if you could use separate fields like labels. I think labels would be weird. But,
no, annotation makes more sense for me for this. So I state etcd pod with the IP of the endpoint.
unless it's part of the global config, right? Because like the whole purpose of the cluster status object when it was joined was to get those IP addresses to join at, right? So we have.
Otherwise, I read from the cluster status.
Yeah, cluster status was supposed to be the original way that we did this.
Yes, I see a problem in cluster status that now we have some cluster which grow at the control plane, but not the TCD. You understand?
Well, there was the particular field for etcd endpoints that that related to this. Sorry, I'm getting pinged by other stuff.
Okay, okay, so this is a point that should be addressed. There are some idea. I'm very happy with the solution I have with the pod IP. So maybe if you have a chance to comment on the PR, then we find something better.
Yeah, why don't I link to, when I do this PR today, just so you're like aware of the hellscape that is my life. I got a lot of stuff to go through. So I'll put it higher in the priority list.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it in more depth later today as well. You know, I think we need to make sure that if we are discovering the endpoints, that we don't just necessarily rely on just data from the config, but we can use that data from the config to do the introspection to get it. Because once we have kind of the credentials that we need, we should be able to just query etcd itself to get the valid list of current endpoints.
Yeah, I always thought we were going to use cluster status. I thought that was the whole purpose of adding the endpoint information into cluster status.
Yeah, I think cluster status is a great place to start potentially, but kind of trust but verify.
Yes.
Otherwise, I see us potentially getting into issues where we could potentially be using stale data.
Yes, I agree.
All right, why don't we review the PR and ruminate on it? There's like a bunch of other PRs that are kind of flying around too. So I think it'd be nice to promote to beta, but I don't think it's required to promote to beta. I think we could leave it as experimental and people would still use it. I know we would beat on it, and then once we've shaken the orange tree, we can absolutely promote this feature to beta. So
okay.
if I'm going back to my notes, I don't think the stacked etcd is in the it's in the long-term important, but I don't think it's in the critical section. At least this particular change. I mean, we're still going to get it into the cycle, but we don't need to have it promoted. I'll say promotion in front of here.
Okay. The last point about API changes, which was related to the API, but in my opinion, not really strictly related to the API, is make flags override configured values.
Yeah. This has gone on for a long time. We should pay down this debt. Have we come up with a concrete proposal yet? I know I tasked Liz with doing this, but I should read through. I'm going to read through this issue today and see where we're at. Oh, holy cats. Okay, I'll read through this one today too.
Okay, so basically there are no critical changes for the API, and I think that there is one. If we are going to beta, we should plan let me say a critical review of all the comments
I think we should. I think we should too. We should set aside a time well before code slush. Like, maybe what's the date today? Hold on one second. Because this release is compressed. How about the week of October 22nd through the 26th? That's 2 weeks from now. Because this release is going to be compressed pretty tightly. Because once we get into November, we can't
I agree.
We can't make changes.
We can take 1 or 2 hour times, go through all the API and see if there are some old awareness or name that should be fixed, because if we are going to beta, then it becomes airy to changes thing.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds good to me. I do have a bunch of PRs to get to today, which is pretty obvious. Are there other things on the agenda that we had to discuss?
Okay, I started working with Lubomir on the phases.
Yes.
And basically, we divided the work in this way. I implemented one PR that I sent some hours ago, that introduced the famous phase runner.
Yep.
That will take charge of running phases and generating subcommand for each phase and so on. So, and I'm sending also another PR for graduating the first phase, just to have an example that then people can
copy them over.
Exactly. And Lubomir it is not here, or at least I don't see him, started to try to define the actual list of phases that we are going to implement.
Mm-hmm.
And we open a PR for discussing this. This is the status as of today. So before evening, two PR in flight that started the work, and an issue that trying to define the plan up to completion.
Okay, I will read through it today. My goal is to get caught back up by the end of the day today, so I should be able to get caught back up on that one.
Okay, if I can help you in reviewing some PR, ping me.
Okay. It's a lot of work in a short cycle.
Yes, I'm starting. I'm trying to compress to have all the work possible done at the beginning.
Yes. Well, we've had plenty of time to prep, so we knew exactly what we're going to do. All right. Are there any other last things before I go off and start reviewing a ton of stuff?
Just a PSA for everyone. I updated the documentation for the API according on a lot of feedback that I read into the channel.
That's you mean the GoDoc documentation that you submitted?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, but documentation can always be improved, so feedback are welcome.
Yeah. So, Duffy, if you want to review documentation overhauls for stuff for the configuration, because I know that was one of the things that you had requested a while ago.
Sure, definitely.
Okay. All right. Are there any other last questions, comments, complaints, concerns? We got 3 minutes left. All right. Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay, I think that's everything. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.